Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tonight, more than 100,000 people are under a boil water advisory in the South Bay. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Customers in Imperial Beach, as well as parts of Coronado, San Diego, and Chula Vista have been notified. We have a look at how this is impacting people and businesses in these areas. But first, KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has more on what prompted the boil water advisory and what it means.
The boil water order came yesterday afternoon, and the earliest it can be lifted is tomorrow. California American Water is the private company that runs the region's water systems. The company is confident the water supply is fine, blaming a dirty faucet at a testing site.
Our water systems are pressurized. So, for example, if there was a main break, the water would flow away from our water system. So we do not believe that there is any emerging contaminant, E. coli, in our water system.
But state rules require 2 clean tests before a boil water order can be lifted. Each test takes 24 hours because water samples have to be cultured in a lab to confirm or refute the presence of pathogens. The company was offering bottled water to Imperial Beach residents, but they had run out this morning. The boil water order is another crushing blow for Imperial Beach.
Just disappointed, really, in how we have just been marginalized and disenfranchised and forgotten about as a community. You know, we've suffered with our ocean being poisoned for so long, only to later find out that our air is poisoned as well. Our parks around the area, especially in the Tohono River Valley, are poisoned. And now our drinking water is poisoned.
San Diego County has declared a state of emergency in the border region because of cross-border sewage, but Governor Gavin Newsom has resisted pleas for the same, and the Biden administration is also unmoved by calls for a federal state of emergency. Those moves could bring state and federal funding.
You do everything you can to get the information out there, for sure, yes, absolutely. That's our role as a city. It's to protect our community's well-being, their health, and all we get is an emergency after an emergency. Yeah.
The Environmental Protection Agency has designated a $630 million plan to capture and treat sewage on both sides of the international border. But those fixes remain years away. The beach near the border has now been closed to human contact for 625 days.
If certain other segments of the coastline of the state of California were closed for the number of days that Mayor Aguirre and the communities here in South County have faced, all hell would be breaking loose. This would be the biggest emergency in the history of California. That needs to be said.
Padilla was in Imperial Beach to announce $3 million in state funding for the development of a tool to track pathogens in ocean water. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
For the people of Imperial Beach who've dealt with polluted ocean water for months on end, the boil water order is just one more thing to deal with. KPBS reporter John Carroll talked to residents and a business owner about the latest water problem.
At the Imperial Beach office of California American Water, they were having trouble getting even bottled water to residents this morning. Workers told us they were having to go to Costco and pay retail to get it. Dozens of people lined up in their cars and trucks to get a case. Finally, more arrived, and the scramble to get it to thirsty residents picked up again.
I live in the Coronado Cays.
The Cays are one of the neighborhoods with possibly tainted water, but Alexandra Polis was much more concerned about her mother, who lives in Chula Vista, another area in the same situation.
To make sure my mother has water, so that impacts her on a daily basis, just for the animals, and we do have, everybody's got animals.
It's devastating to our community. It's completely unacceptable.
Imperial Beach Mayor Paloma Aguirre was all over the city today, including watching over the water distribution. She's concerned about the economic impact on IB residents and businesses.
The workers who depend on their tips to survive are not having that income come into their household. I mean, what else is going to happen here?
Here along IB's famous Seacoast Drive, the vast majority of businesses are closed, save one. It's the ye old Plank Inn. They're open mainly.
Talk about kicking you when you're down. We lost the beach, now we lost the water. The only thing that people can drink down here is beer.
More specifically, beer that comes out of bottles and cans, not on draft. He can't serve food right now, but Mattis has the kind of liquor license that allows him to serve pre-packaged drinks, so that's enough that he can stay open.
Get some attention to Imperial Beach. What can we do to fix it? We keep on trying to get a leg up, and every time we try to get that leg up, we get a leg kicked out from under us.
California American Water Company says the boil water order should be lifted within the next 48 hours. It can't come soon enough, especially for Imperial Beach residents who've had enough of contaminated water impacting their way of life. John Carroll, KPBS News.
And if you don't have access to bottled water, you must boil water for at least 1 minute. Don't use water from your refrigerator, even if it is filtered. Use boiled or bottled water to prepare food and to brush your teeth. Give pets bottled water or boiled water that has been cooled. You can use tap water for bathing, but be careful not to swallow any. And now to our other top story. A Marine pilot was killed when their jet crashed overnight in San Diego. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer has the story.
The FA-18 fighter was on a training flight when it crashed in a remote part of MCAS Miramar just before midnight. The jet and pilot were based in South Carolina. After an overnight search, crews found the pilot's remains. The name of the pilot is being withheld until 24 hours after next of kin has been notified, standard practice for military line-of-duty deaths. The crash happened in the Scripps Ranch area of the base, east of Interstate 15, and is remote and largely unpopulated. The Marines say no property on the ground was damaged, and the crash is under investigation.
There's little sign of a fighter jet except a piece of the fuselage and cockpit.
In 2008, an FA-18 Hornet crashed into a University City home west of the base. That aircraft approached the base from the west, a diversion from the standard traffic pattern to and from the base. Aircraft taking off from Miramar launched to the west and are supposed to immediately turn to the north, avoiding flying over the densely populated University City neighborhood. Aircraft approach to land from the east over the unpopulated eastern portion of the base. The F-18 that crashed Thursday is the Delta variant of the jet, a two-seater which serves as the Marine Corps' carrier air wing fighter, deploying on nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. It's an aging airframe that's being phased out and replaced by the F-35 Charlie. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Dangerous and oppressive heat is gripping a large part of the country. A state of emergency has been declared in Michigan, where a storm spawned a tornado, catastrophic flooding, and knocked out power for hundreds of thousands. The heat there and in other states is even forcing some schools without air conditioning to dismiss kids early.
It's bad. It is. Can't bring kids back into that environment. I mean, it's like being in an easy bake oven.
And in Louisiana, fast-moving wildfires forced the entire town of Maryville to evacuate. Typically during this time of year, the state is preparing for hurricanes and other tropical storms.
Well, we are tracking an intense heat up as we travel throughout the weekend, especially starting on Sunday. Things are really going to start to heat up, especially for our inland areas. So we're going to tell you how hot we're going to be getting and when our next chance for rain is. We also have an excessive heat watch in effect, those areas that are of our most concern coming up.
Mortgage rates across the country are soaring this week, and consumers appear to be more anxious about the economy. As Laura Aguirre reports, today the Federal Reserve Chair revealed his likely next steps to curb inflation.
It is the Fed's job to bring inflation down to our 2% goal, and we will do so.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell cut to the chase right out of the gate.
We are prepared to raise rates further if appropriate and intend to hold policy at a restrictive level until we are confident that inflation is moving sustainably down toward our objective.
This forecast coming at the same time mortgage rates are soaring to a 22-year high. A 30-year fixed rate is now averaging 7.23%. Up nearly 2 points over the same time last year, according to Freddie Mac. And despite the current pace of price increases slowing this summer, the Fed may not be ready to ease off the interest rate gas pedal.
Although inflation has moved down from its peak, a welcome development, it remains too high.
Chairman Powell says the big picture is what matters when tracking prices.
Core goods prices fell the last 2 months, but on a 12-month basis, core goods inflation remains well above its pre-pandemic level.
Also out Friday, the University of Michigan's monthly consumer sentiment survey, which measures Americans' attitudes about the economy. Despite a slight dip in consumer confidence between July and August, overall sentiment was still far better than last summer, when inflation peaked at over 9%.
We are navigating by the stars under cloudy skies. At upcoming meetings, we will assess our progress based on the totality of the data and the evolving outlook and risks.
Bottom line for now, brace for more interest rate bumps in the months ahead. I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
If you're looking for something cheap to do this weekend, then Hollywood has you covered. SDSU's Miro Kopik tells us about the return of National Cinema Day in the Friday Business Report.
This weekend is National Cinema Day. Last year, for the first time, the theater owners banded together. For $3, you could have seen any movie. It was so successful. Over 8 million people went, and it was the biggest attended movie day in years. This weekend, the price is actually $4 a ticket. But that's a great deal when you look at the pricing for movie tickets on a national level. You're almost $11 on average for a movie ticket. Here in San Diego, they can range from $12 to $20 depending on the theater, how premium the theater is, the time of day you're watching your movie. And this is important for the movie theater industry, because from COVID, they were decimated. When the studio shut down and the theater shut down, there was no revenue. One theater chain, Cineworld, which owns Regal here in San Diego, declared bankruptcy. AMC was close to being bankrupt. So this is a major issue of trying to get people back into the theaters.
Writers and actors impacted by the strike in Hollywood got a little extra assistance this week. Volunteers with the Teamsters and other unions handed out bags of food and essential items yesterday. The Motion Picture and Television Fund hosted the food drive. Writers have been on strike more than 100 days now, and actors just over a month. We're getting a new look at the destruction on Maui after catastrophic wildfires. On Lahaina's Front Street, businesses are rising to the challenge and helping survivors. Mike Valerio has the latest on the recovery.
This one was used to be a restaurant called Longy's.
There is agony in every stone of Lahaina's Front Street. Utility teams solemnly at work. Memories of what happened here of visceral and mournful force.
People were jumping in the water, but also there's no air because the fire is eating all of the oxygen, right, in the air.
Glassblower Ryan Staub takes us to his art gallery, what remains of it.
I'm kind of overwhelmed right now, honestly. I'm kind of like this right here, this blue and green in here, this was artwork. This was a stand for a piece. These were my windows where we had tons of beautiful glass art, and now there's just piles of rubble.
But amid the devastation, there is compassion, the Hawaiian spirit of Ohana family.
On the ground, it is just a lot of gratitude.
Pharmacist Dr. Corey Lejano is devoting his dream, his business, to give away medications. Thousands of doses, he says, absolutely free to those in Lahaina who lost everything.
I know that we've administered thousands and thousands of doses of medication, whether that be the expensive injectables for those battling diabetes or any type of behavioral health medications. We've done it across the board.
Amid all of this, there is a feeling among many of duty to stay in Lahaina and help its rebirth.
Will Lahaina make a comeback? Yes, it will.
You do have that hope.
Yes, and will I stick around to help Lahaina make a comeback? I will.
There are, literally thousands of people who need stability and who need something to look to. And as trusted healthcare professionals, we have that mantle and that responsibility to take care of that.
I'm Mike Valerio reporting.
Tens of millions of smartphones go out of use every year. Now, a group of computer scientists at UC San Diego say they have a way to put their computing power to work. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge has the story.
How long do you keep and use your smartphone? An estimated 2.5 years on average. The battery dies, or there's this new improved model you just got to have. In the United States alone, 150 million smartphones are discarded every year. They end up in drawers or they end up in a pile like this.
But typically the processor is still totally fine. So people are getting rid of these devices every couple of years or so, and they still have a powerful processor within them.
And that processor is the part that UC San Diego computer scientists want to repurpose. Switzer says the processors in these smartphones can run perfectly well for at least 6 years.
We could collect up old unwanted phones and redeploy them in, for instance, a data center, then we would reduce the number of new hardware that we needed to build.
The UCSD research delved deeply into the carbon energy costs of creating new computer hardware, which Switzer says is considerable. Today, smartphones are recycled, so to speak, but the goal of extracting precious metals like copper and silver is difficult and renders very little return. The UCSD scholars first needed to get a bunch of unwanted phones to try to turn them into little data centers. Fellow computer scientist Gabriel Marcano says Switzer had a plan.
Jen had a donation drive, effectively, where she asked for donations for anyone on campus. They had old phones lying around in a drawer to please give them to her, and had a little box in front of her office, and we got a lot of phones that way.
Then the work began, assembling phones together so their processors could work on the same operating system. They called them phone clusters, but in the lab they look more like a smartphone toast rack or maybe a phone sandwich.
One of the coolest things about these is a phone on its way is already a data center in a box.
Pat Panuto is a professor of computer science and engineering at UC San Diego, and he's Switzer's advisor. He says his fellow researchers have proven that smartphone processors can be linked and can operate like a data center. Switzer says they hosted a web page on one of them. Panuto says the devices wouldn't be used by consumers, but they could enhance the power of data centers, expand and decentralize the internet cloud.
Look, we have done N equals 10 phones in the lab. We've built a little 10-phone cluster. We've proven it works. We've proven you can distribute jobs across it. And now we want to go to N equals 100, N equals 1,000, N equals 2,000, and say, all right, what happens if we start to run real workloads? What happens if we're doing things that are supporting actual commercial interest?
So if you've got an old smartphone dozing in a drawer, its processor could have a future life. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Well, let's start you off with your weather headlines. What you need to know heading into the weekend. It's the weekend, yay. We do have an end of weekend warm up though, so temperatures are going to skyrocket with the hottest days being Monday and Tuesday. Now there is going to be a chance for showers yet again in the forecast Thursday into Friday, but before that the big focus is going to be the heat. But I want to show you really quickly because we have gotten a lot of rain so far this month. LA coming in just shy of 3 inches of rain. That historical average, just a trace for this month. So very impressive rainfall total. Salt Lake City, similar story, and San Diego about 1.84 inches versus that historical average of barely over a trace. So there's going to be that role reversal. Look at this, where we're supposed to be very wet across the south and the south central. Well, look at that. We're very dry. So it's kind of been a reversal of sorts for our pattern. We've been very wet, but we aren't going to be too wet as we head throughout the rest of our Friday into Saturday, overall, we're going to be staying mostly dry. We'll have plenty of sunshine, but that heat is certainly going to start to impact us by Sunday. Tonight, we're dropping down to a low of 65 around San Diego. We'll rise to 76 by tomorrow. Oceanside, 78. Borrego Springs, 106. Mount Laguna, 74. But there is an excessive heat watch in effect for the deserts as we travel a little bit further inland. That means that temperatures are going to be rather toasty outside, so make sure that you are taking precautions in the heat. Heat-related illnesses are going to be a big concern. So again, take plenty of cooling breaks and also drink plenty of water. 5-day outlook along the coast, well, patchy fog and sun, that's going to be the story throughout the weekend. Highs are going to rise to the 80s by Sunday, 84 on Monday, 87 by Tuesday. So it's going to be quite warm along the coast for the beginning of the week. Wednesday heading a high of 82. Inland, well, highs are going to be rising to the 90s and even the triple digits by Tuesday. So whoo-wee, buckle up. It is going to be hot. Mountains, well, it's going to be ranging in the 70s, so you're not going to be too bad. But for the deserts, well, triple-digit teens on the way. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Bree Guy.
And here's another look at today's top stories. More than 100,000 people are under a boil water advisory. It affects customers of California American Water who live in Imperial Beach as well as parts of Coronado, San Diego, and Chula Vista. They're being told to use boiled tap water or bottled water for drinking and for cooking. The earliest the advisory could be lifted is tomorrow. And a Marine pilot was killed when their jet crashed in a remote part of MCAS Miramar. The F-18 fighter was on a training flight when it went down just before midnight. The jet and pilot were based in South Carolina. The cause of the crash is under investigation.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, local Hawaiians raise concerns that they could be pushed aside as Maui rebuilds from devastating wildfires. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
La Jolla Playhouse's the untitled, unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical looks to the life of the gonzo journalist. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando attended a rehearsal to see how the pop culture icon is being remembered and if he would approve.
My first memory of Hunter S. Thompson was going to see the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas movie when I was in high school.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
That film and Johnny Depp's performance got Joe Iconis hooked on Hunter S. Thompson as a notorious pop culture figure. Then Iconis started to read Thompson's work.
There's real poetry to his language. There was real music in his language, but the content of it was so far out, and it had such a sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of vibe. And when I first encountered him, I wasn't used to that kind of vibe, that kind of aggression and sort of the psychedelic imagery in writing that felt really beautiful and really poetic and really romantic.
It's almost as if the political climate created him. It was a confusing time, and there was this voice so clear. This is what I see, this is what I think. Take it or leave it.
We present an objective point of view. Good journalism depicts, it doesn't disrupt.
Hunter S. Thompson really created this idea of telling the truth in a completely subjective way. And at the time that he created it, it felt really groundbreaking, and it felt like something that was really in the hands of liberal thinkers. It felt like it was something that was in the hands of people who were challenging the establishment.
I both love Hunter S. Thompson, and there's days when I get mad at him for having been one of the forerunners of some of the disinterest in truth or objective truth that I think we're living through right now.
That's Christopher Ashley. 15 years ago, as the new artistic director of the La Jolla Playhouse, he commissioned Iconis to write a Thompson musical.
I was really passionate about telling Hunter S. Thompson's story in a way that did not try to sugarcoat anything in his life and allows him to do things that are ugly and problematic, and then leaves it to the audience to decide was this guy worth it?
Sit down. I don't need to prove myself to any of you.
Gabriel Ebert plays Thompson. He sees the play as being about a writer's struggle to do something to shake up the status quo.
Hunter's belief that good art could, at its best, change the world, but even if it's not able to change the world, it could make the world a safer place for the people in it who feel lost and alone.
Us, the weirdos, the outcasts, the freaks, street power.
At the center of all of these mad ramblings, I think, was someone who cared deeply about people who feel othered, people who feel like misfits, people who don't have any place to belong, and he was trying to make a space for them.
I'm gonna keep writing, but everybody else, get back center stage. Let's keep singing and dancing.
What do I think Hunter S. Thompson would think about being the subject of a musical? I think he would hate it.
I would hope that he'd like the words. He loved words. Words were his jazz. Words were his music. And Joe is not frivolous with his words. And Joe gets the laughs in a way that I think Hunter would appreciate. Joe tells the truth in a way that I think Hunter would appreciate. And Joe also lies in a way that I think Hunter would appreciate.
I think he might have fessed up to some of the ways in which we really critique him. Not only was he smart, but he was also up for fun, and he was up for the unexpected. And hopefully this musical is both of those things.
And Iconis does think Thompson would appreciate the themes.
This show desperately wants to feel like it's making a place for people who don't often get a place made for them in the world and in musical theater specifically. And I think he'd like the puppets.
Oh, and maybe the sex doll. The untitled, unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical hopes to be everything you love as well as everything you might hate about the man and the myth that was Hunter S. Thompson.
The end.
Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.